Forgiveness isn't about putting a big label of, this was okay, I'm so fine with what happened. It's not that. Welcome to The Middle. I'm Ganel-Lyn Condie, your host. I wanted to talk with you about the subject of forgiveness. It's so fun to throw that word around, and it's a lot harder to live it. And so I wanted to just kind of break down what I've learned over the last few years about forgiveness, what it is and what it isn't. Gandhi said, forgiveness is the attribute of the strong, which means it is a challenge. It takes skill, and it's not something that we just easily do. And yet we talk about it so frequently as if it's just like an automatic response. When we're hurt, when we're traumatized, when we feel betrayed, it's so much easier to talk about forgiveness than to actually go through the process. So I want to break it down on what I've come to understand forgiveness is. Forgiveness for me has a lot to do with boundaries. When I am feeling triggered by a situation or I'm trying to address a relationship that's been hurtful in the past, I take a step back and look at my boundaries. I guess a good example of this would be around the holidays when sometimes we're with family and maybe we have history with certain relationships and it's painful and we're not always sure what we can handle and what we can't handle. Go back to what your boundaries are. For example, if there's an idea that we're all going to get together for this many days, but you know that if you stay around those individuals for that long, you're not going to stay in a place of forgiveness. A boundary would be, I can show up for this many hours or this many days. I can't do a week, but I can do 2 nights. That would be an example of a boundary. Another example would be that maybe you're not as accessible in that relationship as you once were. Forgiveness is supported by our boundaries. So if you find that you've worked through some feelings, you've tried to forgive, you've tried to move past something, and yet you keep getting pulled back, you may want to look at your boundaries and what you're allowing yourself to be a part of and pull back, reassess, and reestablish the boundaries so you can stay in a place of forgiveness. The next thing that I've come to understand is that forgiveness is about letting go, but not fixing. We would love to maybe go back into a time machine, go back into the past, take a situation that was super hurtful, where we felt betrayed, overlooked, or really traumatized, and fix it. And I think all of us believe that if we could do that, then we could forgive. And oftentimes we believe the anger or the hurt that we're still holding on to is a protection from what has happened in the past. And I've come to know that for me, forgiveness is about letting go. It's not about going back and fixing anything. It's about letting go of the charge around the experience. And that sometimes takes outside support. And so I'm not trying to oversimplify. I'm going to talk about tools in just a minute. But the next thing I want to share is that for me, the idea of forgiveness is a gift I give back to myself. It's a gift of freedom. And so it's worth the effort. If you find that you're constantly replaying a story, a situation where you've been hurt, where every time you see someone on social media or you're around them, you feel those triggers and those emotions, that's okay. But realize that that might be a signal that you have more to work through, more forgiveness to go through. And that brings me to my last point. It's a process. Triggers are teachers. That means that when you see someone post or when you're around someone or you know, I don't know for you, it may be like this. I hear a song sometimes and I'm right back in that situation and I'm feeling all the same emotions. That trigger is enough to invite me to consider that I have more to process. You know, the cliche of the onion, that forgiveness really is like that. It's not a one or done. It's a revisiting. And so sometimes we go into judgment about ourselves because we're like, wait, I already went to therapy about that. I already addressed that. I thought I had forgiven them. Why am I being triggered again? And I believe that's because God knows what we're willing and able to handle in a situation. And we learn and we forgive at a layer. And then sometimes in the future, we have to bring it back up again because we're ready to learn a new part of that story for us. Okay, so those are things that I believe forgiveness is. Boundaries, letting go, freedom, and being triggered so that you can be taught. What is forgiveness versus what it's not? Are you going to edit this out? What forgiveness is not?
There you go.
What we just talked about what forgiveness is. What is it not? It is not saying that what happened to you is okay. It's not. If you've been abused, if you've been rejected, if you've been hurt, overlooked, or betrayed, forgiveness isn't about putting a big label of, this was okay, I'm so fine with what happened. It's not that. Forgiveness is not a one-time thing. It's not one and done. It's a process like we've already talked about. It's not easy. It's going to take effort. You may need support to do it. And finally, forgiveness isn't about giving access. I think oftentimes we think forgiveness looks this way. Like, if I forgive this person, then we're hanging out all the time. If I forgive this person, we're best friends again. We're talking all the time. No. If I'm really in a place of forgiveness, I can feel that freedom in my heart. But that doesn't mean that that person has access to me. It doesn't mean we're having an ongoing relationship. It just means that I've gone back into what has happened. I've worked through the forgiveness. I've released the trigger or the charge around it, and I'm free. That means that hopefully if I run into them at the store or I see one of their posts, am I able, this is kind of my litmus test, am I able to be kind? Am I able to be in an authentic way loving to them? That to me is a signal that I've worked through the forgiveness process with them. So what are the tools? It's great to talk about this, but I like to know the how, not just the what or the why. The how for me, these are just some suggestions. If you are bringing up some really big trauma, I don't want this episode to feel oversimplified of complex issues. I think therapy is so huge, especially trauma therapy. There are therapists that are very specifically skilled and trained around trauma release and trauma healing. And so if you've had some significant trauma in your life, an episode about forgiveness, you're like, seriously, you don't even know what I've gone through. And I don't want to assume or oversimplify. So seek out a therapist that may be specific to the trauma that you've gone through. If you've gone through betrayal, there's specific therapists that understand that dynamic and what that does. In a response to betrayal, we oftentimes start to show up in other ways in our lives. So therapy to me is one of the top tools in aiding our forgiveness process. The next one is one of my favorites. It's the writing the letter, but you don't ever send it. So I've had this in different forms where I will just write out a letter. I'm like just in my room and I'm in the corner and I've been triggered and I'm frustrated, or new situations happen, or I found out new information. All those old feelings show up. Have you had that? I will sit down and like literally write out the letter of everything that I wish I could say that I haven't said. I'm not sending it. And I think that's really important because oftentimes things happen. We're emotional. We're triggered. We want to respond. Do not text in the middle of that. Do not post on social media in the middle of that. Don't email during that time. Take some breaths and get grounded, and then give yourself the space to write that letter and not send it, to get those emotions out. I've even gone to a low traffic area. That's what I call them, where maybe it's up in the canyon or out somewhere where I know no one's going to bother me, and I'll have the unfinished conversations. For me, it's been with people that have even passed that aren't even living anymore, that I don't have the opportunity to call them up and say, hey, listen, I was really hurt in 1984. See, no one's even old enough to remember that year, but I am. And can we talk this through? And they're not even around to have that. I am once again inviting you to consider this as a tool, because it's the gift you give yourself so that you become unhooked. And it's been amazing and therapeutic to do that, where I literally will sit down and pretend, if you don't feel crazy doing this, that's why I say low traffic, so no one thinks you're talking to yourself, and have that conversation. Maybe for you, journaling and writing it out isn't as effective as speaking the words. Have that conversation with the person, invite them, their spirit, to be there with you, and say the things that you wish you could say. We often push those feelings aside. We don't know as a kid sometimes how to process those feelings of anger, frustration, or fear. And as we age, we still don't process them well because we've never learned. And I think one of the ways in which we can learn to forgive is that we give voice to the feelings that maybe the things we didn't say when we were hurt originally. And so giving yourself space to say the things that you didn't say oftentimes releases that grip or that charge. And then finally, I know it sounds cliche, but prayer for me has been the greatest tool for forgiveness. I can tell God all of my feelings, all of my complaints, all of my frustrations, and he's totally fine with it. He's not offended. He's even okay if I get mad at him sometimes. It's amazing. He's not like, you really hurt me there. I thought I was a better God than that. He is so fine with us being angry with him. And let's be honest, sometimes we don't understand why God hasn't shown up, why he hasn't solved the problems in our lives that we wish he could, or we know he can, but he doesn't. And so have the conversation in prayer that feels like you're really talking to your dad, that he gets you, that he understands your pain. He was there. He watches his kids hurt each other sometimes. And as a good parent, he doesn't always intervene. And so what I love about prayer is that you're not talking to someone that doesn't know what happened. And if you have to pour out your heart in a way that it takes a while to really tell God how you feel about things, I think he understands that as well. I know for me, I like to think of prayer on a menu. Sometimes I'm ordering from the a la carte, right? The fast food prayer. And it's just like this quick chatter. And sometimes it's like the big Thanksgiving feast where I sit down and I go through all the feelings, all the fears and concerns and insecurities. And I know that if I do both of those things, then my prayers with God, my relationship with him starts to change, because I'm not just doing the quick praying, but I'm also giving space for those longer conversations. And I think when it comes to forgiveness, we need to give ourselves space and time. It's hard to forgive. It's not easy. And oftentimes we're challenged in ways in relationships that we had no idea were coming. We didn't know that we were going to be left alone or betrayed or hurt in the way that we were. And what I've come to know is the people that have worked through forgiveness have become really the compassionate friends in my life. They're the people that understand the process of working through these disappointments in relationships and staying in the arena, so to speak. And so remember that if you're just, feeling like it's time, especially during the holidays, I've got to address this relationship. I'm going to see so-and-so and I don't like how I feel when I'm around them. It's a perfect time to practice some of these tools. Remember what forgiveness is and what it's not. It's not saying that what they did was okay or giving them complete access to your life. It's just allowing you to have the freedom to move forward so that you can be the best, most loving, creative self that you came to earth to be. Thanks again for joining us here on The Middle, and we'll see you again soon.